Ladies and gentlemen, are you guys looking at the forensics of Justin's discussion now? Refers to the wife as her. But once he leaves the call, yes, honey, yes, dear. Have you noticed that, ladies and gentlemen? You gotta pay really good attention. I'm just using my forensic information on this. So like on the call in the class, well, my wife, her. But once he leaves, I'm sorry, dear. Yes, honey, anything you say. I love it. I love it.
That's right.
I love it. I love it. You know, Justin, you know this is all fun and games, right? We have a lot of respect.
You're 100% right. That's fine. It's all good.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, good to see everybody's face again. Any major milestones that we're celebrating? No? Oh, come on. No anniversaries, no birthdays, no new pets.
I woke up this morning.
Amen. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's quite positive. That's quite positive. Yes. Yes. Anybody else?
My husband's starting a new job.
Congratulations. Do you mind sharing a little detail?
He's a security officer, and so he has a position with a well-known company, the name I'm not going to disclose, but he's not with the company. He's doing security under a contract guarding the company. And I'm very proud of him.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Is he also in the force by any chance?
Actually, they receive a certain amount of training, but they're not considered a part of the police force. They're security officers, but not guards, but they're not on the police force.
Okay.
But they work hand in hand with the police when it comes to guarding businesses and things. They work hand in hand. And yes, we survived this nasty winter storm. Woo-hoo!
Yeah.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. And so well, congratulations to you and your family. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Yeah, I just want to see who was gonna pick on me in the chat. So you guys can't wait. What's my new name? What's my team's new name? Anybody remember?
Commanders?
Commanders.
I'm hearing a lot of bad feedback on that pick, but I think that was your pick, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Professor, you thought that would be the one?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So you were right, but I guess that's the important part. You were right. We'll leave it at that.
It's not about being right. I think we'll go to the Super Bowl. Just the name has a Super Bowl champion name to it. Now, watch your comments, ladies and gentlemen. I'm recording this. Really? I'm joking. I'm teasing. It's just, we're super excited. The DMV area is super excited. We got a new name and we believe new fortunes will come our way. Anybody want to add something to it? I know I have some Eagle fans, Cowboy fans, some fans I could care less. They just want me to move on to the lesson. Yeah, I can really smell Super Bowl for real. We're actually doing our Super Bowl dance right now. We think next year's our year. No? Nobody could care less? Okay.
Good luck with that.
Oh, I like that, Darlene. Good luck with that. Thank you. All right. Let's dive right into it. It's past 7:05, 7:10 now. So this is our game plan. So it looks a little jam-packed, but it's really not because what we started last week. I'm gonna do something cool regarding the Speak MBA, just something to kind of prepare you for week 7 when we start discussing business combinations. So it'll be a little bit different instead of buzzwords, just something that I just thought will spark a lot of, wow, I didn't know. It will just spark a lot of conversation, to be very frank with you. So that we'll spend a few minutes on that. And then we got a co-instructor today. So I'm super, super excited. We just upgraded her title today. So she's not getting my paycheck, but this is volunteering. Then we're gonna dive into co-teaching with Darlene today. So we're gonna refer to her as Professor Darlene. Ladies and gentlemen, give her all due respect. It's not easy. Looking forward to her covering business combination. And then we'll pick up where we left off last week regarding our Milestone 2 paper. We went through the rubric, the areas where I wanted you to focus on, and then we'll close it out with the economic matrix because that is coming up again, just in case you ran out of factors to discuss. Today, I want to discuss two of them, price elasticity and market structure. So by the time you leave me today, I want to pull those two factors out to kind of get you started on that. Then I'm going to turn it over to Darlene. She'll have 20 minutes to take over the class, and then she's going to go over business combinations. So you have a better understanding of business combination for your next post. And that's our game plan. So my slides you already have. What I did was I added about one or two just for talking points. So you do have my slides already. And then after these slides, I will post them with the recording because again, there's nothing new in there besides what we're going to cover today. So that's our game plan. And then let's go. So these are facts. So it's a lot for, I'm not following proper etiquette when it comes to presentation 101 with a number of bullet points, but I just couldn't resist to kind of share some things with you. So Ben & Jerry's is owned by Unilever. What company is Unilever? What's so unique about this company called Unilever? Anybody know from maybe research coming across? What do they owe?
I have no idea.
So yeah.
That's why we're here. No problem at all. That's why we're here. Do I have any volunteers to be my co-pilot in the chat?
Me,
Any volunteers? Who's me?
Angie.
And with the coolest background, phenomenal, please. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
For those that are familiar with Unilever, where are they based? Is it a US-based company or a foreign-based company? No? All right. I got a phenomenal slide coming. It's a foreign-based company. Are you familiar with Procter & Gamble?
Yes.
Right? I have an awesome slide coming for you to kind of compare those two. So there are Unilever and Procter & Gamble are the poster child when it comes to business combination strategy. If I show you the brands that Unilever owns, you'd be like, you got to be kidding me, right? So they're domiciled in the UK. It was in the Netherlands before, but now it's domiciled in the UK, but it's a foreign brand. Walmart, look at this, 1.8 million every hour of profit. That is amazing. So every hour, that's their coffers. But remember, they're a retail-based company, the largest retailer that we have. They find a strategic way to do a lot of strategic alliance, and that's how they grow. And look at the acronym of Yahoo, right? Yahoo was on chopping board a few years ago, a few decades ago. Yahoo was the poster child of internet. And now people are figuring out what happened, why they didn't merge, why did somebody didn't buy them out? Somebody did. What was the actual AOL conversation? So when it comes to M&A, Yahoo was an interesting conversation to have. And I'm just gonna skip down. The one interesting one was the Facebook one. Have anybody tried that before? Try it. Try it. When after this call, just try using the caret. If you're a big Facebook fan, if you just put the /, it goes to Mark Zuckerberg's profile. And you add a 4 to it, it goes to his profile. And you guys got to remember, Mark Zuckerberg, when it comes to business combination, he uses this terminology that he doesn't hire people, he acquires talent. So if you look at his, if I can use this in a very polite way, WhatsApp is a massive message app globally. It's not really trending in the US as much, but if you globally, oh my goodness, it's in Asia, Europe, on the African continent, Latin America, WhatsApp is a huge communication platform, and it's owned by Facebook, right? Or Meta now. He acquired that. And then the most, it depends on who you're speaking to, the millennials or the younger people, Instagram, again, he acquired that. So that's a business strategy that he uses when it comes to business combination. And I like the Amazon one, right? So you can see how Jeff Bezos grows his platform, talks about customer centric. But again, Jeff Bezos is also in the business of business combination, right? Look at the brands that he owns. Whole Foods, he owns that. Washington Post, for those that like newspaper, he owns Washington Post. And then the other subsidiaries that he owns, again, he's in the business of business combination. So let me stop there. There's besides one I want to add, Samsung, right? Can you imagine 20%, right, of their intake is the GDP of Korea? It is a big conglomerate that again expands through the devices that it offers. Anything for comment? Anything that surprised you? Something you're like, wow, I didn't know.
The
Samsung
Dasani
is big.
just purified tap water.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard Charlie first, and I come to you, Tracy, if you don't mind. Charlie, what were you
Okay, I'm
saying?
sorry.
I was just saying that I did not realize that I knew Samsung was big, but I didn't know they were 20% of the GDP of Korea big. That's surprising.
Absolutely. And let's be geeks here. So what is GDP? What's the component of G? Why is GDP so important? What is the textbook definition? Anybody remember? All right. Just for time's sake, it's like sum of all final goods and services produced within a country, right?
Mhm.
So quote unquote, the aggregate of what the country produces, right, would determine the size of the economy is based on GDP. And Korea is not a small little country, ladies and gentlemen, right? That's interesting, Charlie. Good point. Tracy, back to you, ma'am.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Charlie. It was like we both started at the same time.
It's fine.
Dasani water is just purified tap water. It doesn't come from the natural spring.
Yes, ma'am. Very interesting, right? So depending on what we're paying for, the brand name or something else. So that's phenomenal. Can I get two more or one more, then we can jump off? Anybody else? Something that just to
Yeah,
kind of get your mind right. Mhm.
I didn't know that Marvel Comics owned the rights to the word zombie. That's like that word's been around forever. How did they acquire? So if we say zombie, are we violating trade secrets here, or?
You have to pay royalties to Marvel Comics for saying the word zombie.
Right. And then again, the rights of the word is very subjective, right? And again, I do not have a lawyer hat on. I could not even make justice to when it comes to those regulations, but there's a difference between copyright and then trademark, right? And how we trademark. Now, it blows my mind. Like, again, what are those rights? What does that look like? So once owned, now in a court of law, what do they have over that word zombie? Because again, it's a word. And I don't know how that could be earmarked back to Marvel because maybe what it produces. It's quite interesting. So if anybody knows, let me know like exactly how they can sue any one of us if before how they got the rights to that name.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And then the other one was Google was originally named Backrub. Seriously?
And well, does that surprise you? We're not an alphabet of companies, so that doesn't surprise me one bit. Okay, the Google boys were quite creative. They have more bank in their bank account than all of us combined. I'm assuming. I don't know how rich you guys are, but they can call that company anything they want if you have billions in their name. Right. One more. Anything else?
And number 7 jumped out at me, but that's just
Expand on it.
1 in 10 Europeans were conceived in an IKEA bed.
Yeah.
Means a lot of people buy IKEA, I guess, in Europe. It's pretty big.
I keep my mind PG. Yeah. Ms. Brown, I got you on that one. Yeah. So, so if anybody literally want to add to their family, Justin, I think we know where to go. IKEA bed.
I'm not buying from IKEA now. That's it.
Awesome. Good. So
What about 16?
oh, okay. I got super excited. Let me go back.
$1 trillion it's offshore.
Yeah.
Is it really hidden or is it just allowed?
Now, I do have a lesson on tax shelters. So now I guess it comes back to that whole conversation, how healthy our economy is when it comes to corporate taxes. And now what they're able to get away with because of their subsidiaries that they show us. So yeah, so at the end of the day, these are tax holidays in Jersey, for example, in the islands that they can get away with. And I think we got to give them incentives to bring the money on shore so we can tax them. Now it becomes a regulation issue and then making us more favorable. But yeah, that's a lot of money that is actually can be captured in where we are. So that's quite interesting.
Would that increase our GDP?
Absolutely.
So we're understating our GDP by hiding monies.
Yeah, so that when you say GDP, so exactly. So GDP is a function of this formula, right? We have C, which is consumption, plus I, which is investments, right? So when these companies bring their revenue back, they're building more factories, they're hiring more people. That creates the economic activity. Plus the G, which is the government expenditure, right? So government has more tax revenue, they're able to tax more, they're able to actually expand if they're physically responsible, and it grows the economy depending on what kind of where you are when it comes to government structures, if you believe in big government or little government, but absolutely yes, it gives us more credence on our GDP by far. We're about $22-23 trillion. So we're able to capture more, the US economy will be, we'll be jumping, for lack of better words. Good observation there.
Wouldn't the companies come back if we didn't tax them so much?
Anybody answer that question for Barbara? The jury's out. What do you guys think? Yay, nay?
I'm not sure. It's just taxes, right? It's also labor costs, I would think. What do you think, Professor?
Oh, I know as much as you guys know. You know, on a sincere note, right? Fiscal policy, right? The opposite of that is monetary policy. It's a tool that you can incentivize. Now, the question is, back to Andrea's point, it's like if we trickle down where these companies are here, they're paying more taxes, they pay competitive wages, right? It provides an incentive. So now the question becomes, what are we using our tax revenue for? Is it expanding infrastructure, AKA broadband? Are we making it faster for people to connect so they can work from home? So it provides these incentives, and we use the term enabling environment where businesses can thrive. So they don't mind coming back home. But also if they're a public traded company, right, they can hide their tax revenue and off their balance sheets to be able to do what we call fuzzy accounting. So the question is not a straight line. That's my point, right? It can't be, yes, lower the taxes. We tried that under the Trump administration, right? We lowered our corporate tax rate. Ladies and gentlemen, corporate America has so much money on their balance sheet, they were buying back their stocks. They were not giving it down to average American workers. They were not hiring more people. They were not expanding. It cooked their balance sheet, so therefore their balance sheet can look better for their shareholders. Or you can say, let's increase it a little bit, make it more competitive. I think that's what we have done it under Joe Biden administration, where we're a little bit more competitive. So they have an incentive. So now it has become a national security to come back home. So you see how it's turned? It went from profit, now it's a national security to ensure that we actually produce in the US, consume in the US in the advent of COVID. Again, I can go on for 5 hours on this topic, but you're not paying me for that. So my answer is, it depends, right? What the country's long-term strategy is and how they want to lure these companies to bring more money in. But these companies want value for their money, for their tax. They don't want to give you more.
Corporate greed.
Why do you say that? I'm very curious. Why do you say corporate greed? That's very subjective.
There's a lot of companies that I deal with on a daily basis that I know that have, billions and billions of dollars, and they'd rather put their funds offshore. And that way it gives them more of a investment in their dollar in the end, because they get more interest on that dollar overseas rather than in America. So if you look at the American dollar in a bank, what do you get? Like 2% on $100, that gets you $2 a month.
Right.
Whereas if you're overseas, you're going to get 10%, 15%, and you're not going to get taxed on it. So you're actually you're not only tax free, but you're gaining interest on that money.
Very good analysis. So that becomes another investment vehicle where they're turning their tax revenue into an interest-bearing account, either a sweep account, capital markets, you name it. It's possible. It's very, very possible. So again, back to Barbara's point, can we find an incentive to have a better tax regime? Again, this is beyond our economics. Now we get into physical policy and government regulation to figure out how the US companies can do it. And I think US companies are trying, right? We got to give them those incentives, because if you go to the Netherlands, for example, or Ireland, for example, right? They've created a tax haven to attract many of these US companies to create a domicile there. I don't know what we can do. That's a very good point, everyone. Last one, if someone had a thought, then I want to close it out. Very good conversation, very robust. So that kind of teased us into Darlene towards the end of the class, where now your mind is figure out, okay, many of these companies that are overseas, like one of your colleagues just mentioned, what are their incentives to get into business combination, right? It could be to have their tax revenues, strategic alliance, create a franchise, have a strategic business unit, you name it. There's so many different combinations that many of these companies engage in for different reasons. And Darlene will go into great conversation regarding organic versus inorganic for these expansions and the pros and cons that are associated with it also. I promised you this. So for Unilever, on the left-hand side, these are all of the brands under their umbrella. And they acquire many of them using business combination strategies. So if you're very familiar with some of these brands, that if you've consumed them, this is Unilever brand, right? Especially if you're overseas, you're extremely famous. Vaseline, I don't want to make an assumption. Many of us in the US, Dove is owned by Unilever. Anytime you buy Dove, you're making Unilever money. What about any other brands that you're familiar with from Unilever? Anybody that you're familiar with? Okay.
I use the liquid laundry detergent a lot here because it's basically a little cost. It's a little cheaper at the store. When you got teenagers ripping through clothes, it's
absolutely yes. Let's put the tide aside and let's go to some good bargain brand. Gets the clothes done. Good, yeah. That's phenomenal. Anybody else?
Lipton tea, of course.
Yeah, Lipton, yeah, that's one of their umbrella.
Skippy.
Skippy.
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter, yes. One more. Going once.
Yeah, ragu pasta sauce.
Which one? Yes, that one escaped me. Yep. So you got the pasta sauce, and then the U.S. one, Procter & Gamble. I say that with humility. Just P&G has a very strong brand globally, also, but they have a lot of brands that many Americans can be very, very familiar with, and that's their brands again using that combination strategy.
Unfortunately, looks like Ben & Jerry's got bought out by their own sellout, so they're no longer a Vermont company.
Wow, see, that's a new one. Interesting.
Elman's mayonnaise.
Yes,
I'm surprised. That one surprises me.
Awesome.
I think this is Charlie. Duracell was divested and sold to Berkshire Hathaway, actually. So they're no longer a Procter & Gamble brand. They're Berkshire Hathaway brand now.
Pick it up. Okay. Did not know that. That's
it happened recently, like a couple of years ago.
Okay. That's a long time. You used a very powerful word, divestiture. So what does that mean? So everybody will be very clear. What does that mean?
Sell it off.
Sell it off. Exactly. Right. So they can shove it. I'll use the word shove in a very polite way. They can remove it from their portfolio, and another investment firm can acquire it for different reasons. And I was doing some research this week around business combination and cultural change and leadership, because like I told you, I'll be teaching leadership next term, so I'm trying to prepare my notes for that. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Warren Buffett's of the world, they own Geico, they own so many different Coca-Cola, railways and so forth. But when they go in, right, there's a strategy for that. When they divest from these companies, right, they go and change the culture, right? Change the culture, number one, fire the ex-CEOs. We advise them to do that. When you go into these organizations, get rid of the executives. If they're underperforming, get rid of them day one, right? And take care of the front end and then restructure the whole business. So awesome. Very robust conversation, guys. All right. So I'm gonna jump right back into where we left off, right? So if you're taking notes, this should look really, really familiar. Last class, we began discussing internal risk. So now I want to close my mouth very politely. Do you have any questions regarding internal risk that I can clarify, because you've seen this since last week? You started your paper, you got stuck on internal risk, you need clarification.
I just had a
Anyone?
quick question. I know you said that you wanted, us to kind of elaborate on 5 to 7 internal risks. Is that like a requirement? The only reason I'm asking is, I'm on like internal risks and I'm like, 4 or 5 pages into my paper. I don't want it to turn into like I don't mind writing a novel, but I just don't want to turn it into a novel.
Okay, so answer your question directly. It's not a hard requirement where you have to have 5, then you have to have 7. I gave you that range to kind of give you content. So let's say, for example, if you're able to identify 3 and 4, you have robust content that gives you proficiency, absolutely. But if you have about 2 and through 2 paragraphs, I'm going to give you needs improvement because there could have been more content that you could have added, right? So the premise is most significant internal risk is plural, more than 1. Now we can have a conversation what's more than 1, but just write enough, right? That gives you enough content to support your risk analysis. So if you have 3 and you have 5 pages, absolutely, why not? Because you have a lot of content to support it. So I'm okay with that, but I'm just giving your peers some range where you can give them something to write about.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome for clarification. Anybody else on internal risk? Going once, going twice. So, okay. Same question. External risk. Do we have any questions around external risk? Because I use the same template as I use for internal risk. Structure the same way. Any questions on that besides the length? Okay. Going once, going twice. So, all right. Any questions regarding the scenarios? I received 1 or 2 emails regarding this, and I don't mind sharing the email conversation. So, any questions before I go to some of the emails that I received? How to set it up? What are we spreading across?
I have a question.
Okay.
I was reading in the e-textbook earlier today about the they were talking about a Monte Carlo way of doing assumptions for the 20% this way and the 20%, doing the pessimistic and the optimistic view. What are your expectations? Do you want us to mirror what they're saying in the textbook, or you want us to pretty much, especially since there was no chapter 7 that we found, and you owe us donuts for that, because that's how we do it in the military. If there's no section for us to read, that's donuts from the instructor. So when we all graduate, donuts from the professor. But anyway, back to this. Do you want us to follow what's in chapter 9 as far as performing our assumptions?
Okay, so follow the textbook structure, right? Which is just an added on better understanding of what the concepts are when you're talking about sensitivity analysis, right? So anytime you are providing scenarios, which this is a case, it's called scenarios, right? 20% increase is a scenario, right? 20% decrease is a scenario. So now based on your assumptions, are those scenarios most likely, right? Worst case scenario or best case scenario? So if you just so simple terms, cold, warm, hot, bare minimum, average, extraordinary, spread. So now you're going to take that 20%, right, and then put it into some form of sensitivity if this was the best case scenario, right, where we can increase by 12% out of the 20 bracket. That's quite hefty. Worst case scenario, 2%, 1% growth, right? That's your worst case scenario. So you're using those scenario analysis to be able to say, these are why I'm proposing these assumptions that are being provided. So that's how I will approach that. So use the text as an anchor, and then go into your spreadsheet itself and then provide that spread. And then that spread has to support, which we discussed in the beginning of the course. What are some of your assumptions behind those spread? And now how did it impact your expenses and then all the way down to the bottom line? Does that help?
Can we use an Excel format in our paper on this one to document the percentages?
Absolutely, yes. So if you want a cheat sheet, what you would do is you already have your projections, right? We've already created that. What I would do if I'm in your shoes, I would create another column in Excel and just label it, for lack of a better word, scenario A, 20% increase. Then underneath it directly, I would manipulate my numbers. When I say manipulate my numbers, means that spread them across, right? And then let the story tell itself. Then immediately underneath that, I will create a scenario B, 20% decrease. And then I will make those numbers look like that. So from a presentation vehicle, to answer your question in Excel, that's how I would structure it, because you will need to manipulate those numbers 2 times. But rather than taking your base number and your projection number from the top and try to play it, you're just gonna confuse yourself. Charlie has a PhD in Excel. Maybe he has a better way of doing it, but I will go the old fashioned way because I do have some gray hair, and I would just do it pure vanilla, cut the blocks. When I say cut the blocks, first scenario, second scenario, and run those. And then take that data and then copy and paste, not the whole entire spreadsheet, right? Just that screenshot. And I'm gonna embed that bad boy into the paper and then explain my assumptions. So you have the figure and then the narrative to support it. And that kind of gives you proficiency from that level.
Okay, that's what I've done. Thank you.
Good job. Okay, going once, going twice. Any questions here? I will come back to financial matrix. I didn't skip that on purpose. So I have a whole slide for that. All right, so last week I kind of gave you a visual outlay of that. Again, please, I am not putting you in a box. All right, I'm just giving, for those that this is not their best area, just visually what it could look like. It's just a starting point, but all of you guys are scholars, so figure out how you want to display it. As long as you cover the content of 20% increase and then 20% short, then you're okay. Okay, this was, again, we went over the last week. It's just a spread over your projections, right? I don't want you to touch the base because it just won't be, it's a done deal. See how that impacts your revenue and your expenditure. Support your spread with reasonable assumptions, which Tracy just alluded to. And then insert your financials into your paper. So you can do it 2 ways, right? I think it was Jim or James, I made that comment earlier. He has a lot of great content, and then he doesn't want to take too much space, so you want to put it into the appendix. You can also put your analysis in the appendix if you like, but you will have to provide a narrative. So if your paper is becoming too much in content, you have an option to inject in your paper or create an appendix for that, and then just make reference to it in your paper. You can do that, okay? And then just explain the impact on your proposed investment. If the 20% rise and fall has altered your whole entire projections that you outlook into the proposed expenditure, expansion, then you can be able to go ahead and do that. All right, good job. All right, so this is new. This is what you're paying me for today. Everything we talked about it was last week. So there's another one that I highlighted in my agenda that it's going to come up again. So in milestone 3, microeconomics were going to come up. So now, what else can you talk about that you haven't talked about? You talked about it in milestone 1. Now you have to talk about it in milestone 2. Now you also have to talk about it in milestone 3. It's not macro, right? So macro, we've already touched on that in week 1 and 2. So individual markets, effect on price of good, individual labor market, the consumer behavior, and then supply. So when I mentioned the word factors, that's what we're talking about. So the rubric on the left-hand side, I'm gonna copy and paste. It says assess the macroeconomic factors. So if you're taking notes, this is where you wanna underline the word macroeconomic factors. It's very subjective, like what are factors? These are the examples of factors. Factors are the variables that goes into discussing microeconomics. That's what we call factors. That might affect your decisions on the proposed investment. Here we go. Support your response with some specific examples or direct evidence, right? So this is where you want to pull one of these factors and then show in the paper how these factors are relevant to the expansion. For example, how competitive is the market, right? So back to the market. So individual markets, you see that already. Labor market. So you can't talk about microeconomics. And as you guys know from the prerequisite of this course, a market is when supply and demand meets, it's a market. Simple as that. So supply and demand, when they cross, we call that equilibrium. That creates a market. So when you go to the store, we have agreed internally what we're willing to pay for a certain price of an item. So there's a buyer and there's a seller. So anytime there's a buyer and a seller, invertly, it's called a market that you're entering into. And then my favorite word, and again, if you're not really familiar with elastic, you'd be like, well, does it have to do with the rubber band? What are they talking about? So how elastic, again, we can Google it, right? Which you probably get a better definition than I can give you based on the source. So how elastic is the price for your product or service? Oh my God, you win me over. That is a whole course by itself, because one of the major factors in microeconomics, we call it price elasticity, and we all deal with it every day of our life. But some of us don't know that it actually has a terminology that's called elastic. So you do it every day. So I just want to give you the vocabulary to support the amazing behavior that you already engage in when it comes to economic. So if I'm in your paper, if you've already talked about price of the good, labor market, now I'm giving you something else you can add to your content. I will start the paper by identifying a few, I use the word few very politely, one or two is a few of the factors, because you don't want to exhaust all the factors in paper number 2. Does that make sense? I want to pause there, because you're going to have to talk about it again in milestone 3. So I don't want you to repeat yourself. So this is not a place where if you have about 5 factors, you want to mention all 5 factors. It'll be great unless you can find 7 more factors somewhere else. And then like my kids would say, you're a GOAT, the greatest of all time, right? So do that. Find a few factors, right? Price elasticity is one factor. Supply of the good, individual markets. You can stop there. If you want to keep going, individual consumer market, if you haven't touched on that. So explain what those are in layman's terms. And then in your paper, provide at least 2 examples that support your factors. And then you have it. That's what I'm talking about. You can select any of these factors. And tonight I want to go over 2 factors in great detail to support the notes, because it said how elastic is the price. I want to show you what elastic really means with some few examples. And then I'll go into what we call market structure, because market structure determines supply and demand, AKA market. All right, any questions on my general overview? Because I have some slides coming up. The purpose of this is to give you more factors. That's the purpose. Going once, going twice. All right.
Professor, I have a question. Sorry, I couldn't unmute. So you want 2 out of the factors, you want us to pick 2 out of these. Is that what you're saying? Or you want us to touch on each individual or each one?
Answer correction is up to you, right? I'm not gonna, I gave you a few. I don't want to put you in it has to be 2 in order to get proficiency, no, right? So you pick a few, you identify what, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, to below the point, if you have 7 factors in your mind, I won't put 7 factors. There's nothing magical about 7, because save some for milestone 3. So just limit yourself as much as possible, but have enough content to support it. So few factors, right?
Got it. Okay.
Awesome. All right. So now I want to explain what price elasticity is, right? If you take anything away from this particular slide, take the word sensitivity. How sensitive consumers are with price increase or decrease of a particular product or service that they like. That's it. And we have a graph that we can illustrate inelastic versus elastic, right? And I'm going to show you what examples of product and services. So it measures the response. So the response is sensitivity of the quantity demand or supply, right? Because again, we're coming back to the market. We're back to economics 101, okay? Of a change in a price unit. So when we change a price of a particular product or service, so for those that can see, I like coffee. I don't know, I'm addicted to coffee. So if Starbucks changes their coffee and increase it by $5, does my behavior change? We call that in economics, am I elastic to the increase in price or inelastic, right? My behavior doesn't change, man, so I'm completely inelastic. Okay, I can continue my behavior. So watch this, I'm gonna come back to this. Look at this example, I have to move my screen a little bit. So when we say the consumer behavior, so I had to try to figure out some few products that we all, in fact, use the term all of us are familiar with to illustrate price elasticity. So when you think of price elasticity, think of the sensitivity in price movement of goods and services based on supply and demand. That's the textbook definition, you can Google it. The practical takeaway is, okay, visually, what does that look like to me so I can write about it? And then figure out in my paper how I can find these examples. If you're thinking about that, I'm gonna answer that for you. But you first need to understand what elastic is and inelastic, that you can't write about it. I say that with humility, right? You can't write about what you don't understand. You can't provide me examples of what you don't understand. So let's understand it, and then we can go into the examples. So when someone says I'm price elastic, that's the word elastic, it means this: when one can of Coke goes up by 10%, demand falls. So that means I'm elastic. Like Coke, I like Diet Coke, but I don't like it that much when you increase it by 10%, because it's a strong substitute, because I can find a substitute, AKA Pepsi. Now we can debate which tastes better. That's now in economics, we call it demand preferences, right? So let's use that Latin term, paribus syllabus, right? So we can keep the conversation real narrow. So the substitute is there. That makes you elastic. So my Tesla lovers, right? For those that love Teslas on this call, Elon Musk says, you know what? My product is so amazing. There's nobody like mine. I'm gonna increase it by 40%. There's gonna be somebody says, well, wait, there's a lot of manufacturers that are in the EV business. So I'm gonna shift over because it's a comparable substitute to electric vehicle. So elastic means that my behavior changes if you increase the price. Any comment on the word elastic before I go to inelastic, which is the opposite? Very straightforward. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, good. So that is being asked for you to talk about in your paper. Inelastic is the opposite of it. When one carton of milk rises by 10%, demand hardly changes, right? Because we're making an assumption. Remember, we're making an informed assumption that milk does the body good. It's a product that we know we need, and there's rarely a substitute. Again, remember paribus syllabus, right? You can get some vitamins. We're not talking about that. We're talking about there's not comparable substitute for that good. So there's inelastic. Can somebody give me an example of what an inelastic good is or service?
Cigarettes.
Amen, absolutely, Mr. Rodriguez, perfect one. Yes. And you want to expand on that? Because that's a very good example. That's a really good example.
Yeah, cigarettes in New York are like $15 a pack. And they're like, I don't know, like $5 a pack in Florida, I think. I don't know. I don't smoke. But the demand doesn't change, whether it's $15 or $5. It's the same.
Absolutely. Now you know the rationale behind it, because consumers are inelastic. Not that because they have a nicotine. I'm saying that with respect to those that are smokers on the call. I'm not insulting you. I'm just want to make a point. They have a nicotine fix, right? They need that nicotine. We can chew gum. Again, we're holding gum as a constant, right? There's other patches that you can get, but again, they need that original cigarette. And for some of them, it's social. Some of them is the behavior. It's all intrinsic, right? And in economics 101, we call that utility, the satisfaction that that product or service gives them, right? It allows them to be inelastic because of the utility of the consumption, right? It's the satisfaction that they get. Very good example. Anybody else? Can I get one more example of either something that's elastic in your life or inelastic? to make sure that we understand.
Will gas be inelastic?
Absolutely. Expand on that because you're right. I will put that in that category.
I mean, you need it if you're trying to go somewhere. I mean, something like that. So I might not agree with the price per gallon, but I'm gonna use it.
Exactly. It's an elastic behavior. We need it. I like the term you use. Very good term. We need it, quote unquote. Are there other substitutes for my cynicals? Yeah, bicycle. Try a bicycle. Right. Try it when it's snowing. I'm just being candid, right? So, but you're right. I think you made a good point. So let me not butcher it. So good. Any elastic, any product or service that you will consider elastic in your life?
Beer
Beer.
specifically.
Yep, absolutely. Right. I'm a big Corona fan, right? And Heineken fan, right? Yeah, these guys, they increase it. Really, Budweiser, here I come, right? It still does the same thing. After watching my team win 5 beers, I'm seeing doubles, right? So it still has the same impact, right? I'm not saying go and drink and drive, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm just making a point. Good. Are we good? Are we good? I work for you, so I just want to make sure you understand before we go into your paper. So when I say elastic, like yes, right? It's a sensitivity change in price, but when it's elastic, I have a substitute. When it's inelastic, it's like cigarettes, right? It's like fuel, right? It's like education, hint, hint, ladies and gentlemen, right? They can increase your fee. You're still taking my class because you need it, right? You can't substitute, right? So that's an
I have a
example.
question.
Absolutely.
Can a product be elastic in one level, like for middle class, but not, upper class or lower? I don't even know what we call those classes anymore. So someone with a higher income group, maybe it would be not elastic, where it might be more elastic to a lower income group.
So in economics, members, to answer your question directly, that comparison would not be fair. So what we're doing here, we're measuring the difference between inferior goods, right? And then normal goods. So that conversation becomes disposable income discussion. So it becomes my discretionary. So the wealthy, like Justin on this call, he's so wealthy where you can increase fuel and it doesn't have a conversation with him because his disposable income is so high, right? That doesn't become a conversation of his sensitivity. So sensitivity is what we call all markets are equal. Information in the market is lateral, right? Income is not too much of a discretion. But if you want to, back to your point, Barbara, if you can spin that into what we call normal goods and then non-normal good or inferior goods, if I can use that term, then income becomes the conversation. So let me illustrate that in textbook definition. When you don't have a job, and I say that with politeness, please, instead of eating steak, you're going for the chicken, right? Because disposable income is really tight. But once you get the job, your dream job, now you're not buying chicken anymore, you're buying steak. So that becomes a normal good versus an inferior good conversation. Now the behavior of the price sensitivity, right, is a completely separate kind of conversation because now we are making an assumption that income is not the core driver, but it's the sensitivity with quotation, right? Because I got to a point where that price is just too much. And I'm not thinking too much about my income. I'm just thinking about does it bring me that satisfaction? So you got to remember when we're talking about price elasticity, it's pegged around how sensitive we are, not too much driven by our income, because income is relative. It's extremely relative. What could be expensive to you may not be expensive to me. So class warfare of low income, middle income, high income, those are what we call luxury goods and services. So Nordstrom, for example, right? It's a luxury good. It's a normal good. It's not an inferior good. But if Nordstrom increases their price by 1,000%, then I have a window that says, wait, now I'm moving from sensitivity to income now. and the satisfaction it gives me. That sweater is amazing. That cashmere, it's not amazing when it's $3,000. I can do it for 1,000, but 3,000 is way out of my park. Now income becomes a conversation.
I
So
see.
my answer to your question is you have to put it into the proper bucket. So what you explain, it has to do with income behavior driven. Price elasticity has to do with more of how the consumers are sensitive to the satisfaction that good brings them. You are willing to pay so much money for education that's inelastic because it gives you that satisfaction of being educated. It allows you to move up mobility economically, right? It changes your friends if you want to use that, if you want to be cynical. It has a lot of satisfaction just beyond the income. Everybody on this call, majority of us on this call are not here to get an MBA because they're going to make more money. It's a goal, it's a personal development goal, right? They want to start their own business. They want to have more acumen. And some bluntly say, look, if I get an MBA, it gives me more job career options. I can make more money. I can move up in my company. It has difference. So that's like my 2-minute answer to your short question. Confused you or helped? Barbara, helped
But-
or?
Yes, that helped. That helped. I had read the I think it was the quarterly report or something of Nordstrom, and they were saying, you know, our customers are demanding we give them specific brands of products and stuff like that. So I was thinking that they might have a higher customers with a higher income. So maybe the same product that might be elastic to someone with a lower income wouldn't be elastic to someone with a higher income, but you're saying just ignore that.
Yeah, ignore that. And so if you want to put a category of Nordstrom, right? And I still with sensitivity. I mean, of course, we have what we call Fashion 101, fashion capitals of the world, right? So you have Tokyo, you have, help me out, Milan, New York, some of them I'm drawing a blank, London, Oxford Street in London, right? So if you go, amazing. Oxford Street is amazing in London, really. If you haven't had a chance, if you're a shopper, you want to go to Oxford Street. Yeah, so when you get on Oxford Street, Louis Vuittons of the world, the Gucci's of the world, I'm just thinking about some street names for a moment that comes to my mind. Hearst is there. Nordstrom, right, doesn't have a real comparable substitute, right? Like I can't walk down on where at my local mall, there's a Nordstrom and a Macy's. Not quite the same, but I can put the same conversation. But Nordstrom doesn't have that kind of concept. So their consumers are the sensitivity, it's inelastic, right? Because I don't have that many of the substitutes. And it gives me that satisfaction to say, it's like a supreme product, it's exclusive. So if you're looking for a bucket to put them in, right, I will put their behavior to be more inelastic and explain that because it doesn't have to be elastic. You can do the inverse in your module. If that's what you're looking for, Nordstrom to place them, the behavior is more of an inelastic because it comes down to there's no real viable direct consumer, right? Because Louis Vuitton is a whole different level of substitute, right? If I'm looking for an item at Nordstrom and I can't find it, or because it's more expensive at Nordstrom, I don't walk across the street and say, I'm going to Louis Vuitton. Ladies and gentlemen, no way, right? For those that like shopping, it's rare. Okay. And, Jim, you have your hand up, please. I see that on my screen.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm thinking of it correctly for my paper. So business intelligence software, right? So in my eyes, companies are kind of becoming more and more, wanting that type of software. It's a imperative for them to kind of run effectively.
Right.
And, this means that even if the prices for those types of products were to increase, the demand isn't necessarily going to be impacted. So does that mean that, the products and services offered by like a business intelligence software are kind of inelastic in nature?
Yeah, follow your train of thought, spot on. Because finish my thought for me, and this is not a riddle, but because they don't have a viable
substitute.
Bingo, great job.
Okay.
All right. So now you're having that economic discussion, and be very confident in your answer because you're spot on.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anybody else? And then there's the third bucket, which is very inelastic, right? So let's use a spa, for example. So as spa treatment rises by 10%, demand falls or drops by 20%, they get punished, right? So because spa is not an essential service, you turn me off, right? It's not an essential service. It's not something I feel like it's a discretionary service. So if your services are more discretionary that people can say, you know what, I don't really need it. Let me be silly for a moment because I don't take myself serious. For me, if the Redskins, I can't call them the Redskins, I apologize. My football team, Commanders, if they actually increase their price drastically, for me, it's definitely not going to be a very elastic because I see them to be very essential, right? I need that. But I have a drop point, right? I do have substitutes, so I become very elastic, right? Elastic won't be a direct football. Maybe I'll go to a golf match. I'll maybe go to a basketball game. I may do something else, right? So figure out best way for you to understand. Use yourself. Think of 3 products, right? Let your company be one, and then kind of see where the category will go. So it gives you a better understanding of if you understand the concept before you can start explaining it in your paper. Going once, going twice. I lost some time here. Okay. So for my visual learners, right, and all of us are visual in a way. Last point to drum home, and I'll show you how you can insert this in your paper. So if you're thinking about things that are elastic, right, soft drinks, cereal, clothing, consumer electronics, cars, and the big word that's Jim used, right, because we can find a lot of viable substitute for these products and services, give and take. And when it comes to electronics, if I don't like an iPhone, I can go to an Android. I keep moving. Cars, okay, pick your poison, no pun intended, right? There's so many options. Now, when it comes to things that are elastic, or excuse me, inelastic, right? Like we talked about, education, especially post-secondary education, right? It's inelastic. Parents are paying galore. You're paying galore. I don't know how you're financing your education. It could be tuition reimbursement, student loan. You can cry about it and use the word polite, right? But you're still gonna attend class, right? But now, if it becomes really, really abnormal, and then you may want to find a viable substitute because there are substitutes. But because of the program that you want, the flexibility that you want, the location you want, you tend to compromise to make it inelastic. Cigarettes, Mr. Rodriguez talked about that. Electricity, because of the market structure, right, that it's in, also influences the behavior of if it's elastic or inelastic. So that's it. So if I'm writing your paper, what would you do? First thing that I'll do, if you're going to use this as one of your factors, introduce price elasticity. What's inelastic? What's elastic? Textbook definition in your own terminology. Then in your next paragraph, right, identify if the product and services that your company is offering in the expansion market is going to be perceived as elastic or inelastic, and give the example of why you think it's going to do. Then you check that box. You're done. That's it. Introduce it as if I have no idea what elastic is or inelastic. I probably don't. Then give me a paragraph explaining your product and services, why it falls into that category, and provide an example of that. And you have your bucket. And that will be more than proficiency for that factor. And then you can add another factor or 1 or 2, then you're done. Any questions on that? Because I'm running out of time. I can go back to the slide if I need to. Going once, going twice, sold. All right, I want to bring Darlene in soon. So now we're 8 o'clock on my watch because we started 5 minutes late. So market structure is the second one that I promised you, right? There's so many different factors. If you want to digest this slide, it's a lot. So the purpose is to understand when I mention market structure, right? Every single business, I use the word every in a very polite way because nothing's absolute. So there could be a wiggle room there. Majority of businesses fall into what we call market structure. So I'm a visual learner, so I always try to make reference to visual learning. So all the companies that I have at the bottom, McDonald's, Mercedes, I'm just calling them. Is there a Kmart? Who bought out Kmart? I mean, now we're gonna age ourselves a little bit. Who actually on this call shopped at a Kmart? I need a break. So
Me. I shopped at Kmart.
I shop at Kmart and we also deliver to Kmart.
awesome. Who on this call has no clue what Kmart is?
Didn't they get bought by Sears?
Ding, 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 ding. And that was the worst thing that ever happened to Sears.
I don't think that it owns the area that I work in, so I know that it's still Kmart's in Florida and the Virgin Islands.
Wow. Okay. So from last time I checked, I haven't been to Florida in a minute. The islands also, but yes, it was, to Darlene's point, it was bought out by Sears. Sears was an iconic brand. I mean, they've struggled. I mean, the worst thing they did was to engage with hedge fund and investment bankers like me to collapse the business for their own selfish reasons. It was an iconic brand. So back in the 90s, yeah, Kmart was it, right? It was a department store. So it was there. I haven't seen one in decades. So they follow the market structure. Last one, Oreos, IKEA, no pun intended, making babies, Subway, Safeway, depending on where you are. If you're in the East Coast, we have Shoppers, we have Giants, Safeway. I don't know if they're still around. Home Depot. They all what we call follow something called market structure. So market structure, as the textbook says, refers to the nature and the degree of competition, right? Keyword, competition in the market of goods and services. The structure of the market, both the goods and markets and service factor. Let me take that again. So the structure determines what kind of factors that the market is going to allow them to compete in the prevailing market structure that they want to be in. So I'm using the word market structure to define market structure. So think of market structure says, okay, I am a company. Where do I compete? What is the structure that determines my competition? Entry into the industry that I'm in, and then the exit of the industry that I'm in, I have to be put into a market structure. So let's start with some of the ones that you're really familiar with. And I'm gonna only focus on the top 3 because that's the only one that really matters. Everything else is just wasting your time. So if you think of perfect competition, that's the dominant ones, right? Like fast food, okay? So if those that are hungry, I think of Burger King, Wendy's, McDonald's. They're perfect competition. They're in the same market structure. The product and services they offer are very similar to each other. They go for bare minimum margin, right? It's really easy to enter into the market because AK, you can do a franchise, right? And easy to exit. It's not heavily capital intensive. You require some $1 million or $2 to own a franchise, but it's not heavily capital intensive like the extractive industry where you need $200 million to enter, like the new earth mining piece. So perfect competition are one of those homogeneous goods and services, easy to get into, easy substitute. If I don't like McDonald's, I can drive a few blocks later and I can see a Wendy's on the left-hand side. And it's done on purpose because of the market structure. So we call those perfect competition. Then when we have monopoly, right, we're taking the Latin word mono, one. It's heavily regulated. Okay, that's why we don't have 5 companies in our municipal offering us water and electricity. It's reason for that, right? We call that economies of scale and efficiency, right? So they offer price, they detect the price with market regulation. So there's a heavy barriers to entry. None of us on this call, Barbara can't wake up tomorrow and says, you know what? I want to start an electricity company in Connecticut. No way. You can bid to start, okay? But they're not going to open the door. Like you can't say, I have an EIN number. My lawyer has filed my articles of incorporation. So therefore I'm building a plant. It doesn't work like that. It will be regulated. So we call that monopoly to control efficiency. Then my favorite, which is called oligopoly, right? Which is dominated by a few firms, right? We call it a concentration ratio. If you ever want to know the dominant players of any particular market structure, take the top 5 companies, add them together, they run the show. Everybody else is just a subsidiary, and I use the word subsidiary meaning that they're feeding off the top. Okay, so think of oil companies, for example. Think of automobiles. They mimic each other. Automobile industries are oligopoly. They mimic each other. Okay, let me prove it to you not in a small town. If you say you're driving on Main Street or Broad Street, have you noticed that all these auto dealers are by each other? True or false? In a very predominant community. Yeah, because they're in the same market structure. If you don't like Ford, go across the street. You go to Toyota, right? Because they're in the same market. Once they all shifted to EV, ladies and gentlemen, can a bona fide automobile company now in the year 2022 say that they're not producing EVs? Can they do that? No, you can't be a bona fide public traded company and not have a conversation about EV. You may not want to do it, but the market structure has forced you. That's what I call market structure. So now the question you're asking yourself now, how in heaven is that relevant to my paper? It's relevant to your paper because it's a micro factor. Figure out, based on the definition that I give you on your right-hand side, which category does your business fall in if you want to talk about market structure. So I've given you the definition, paraphrase what market structure is, figure out, is your company a monopoly in a context that is very hard for them to enter this space? They're the only one. They're government regulated in the sense that the government protects them as much as possible off of competition. Or is it a perfect competition? It's easy to enter, to set it up. It's not heavily capital intensive. Or is it oligopoly? They're in the industry, they're in the top 5 in the industry, right? Did they fall into that? There are a few firms dominating, and there's some small barriers to entry into the space. You identify what kind of market structure it is, and then you provide an example or two, then you're covered. Any questions on the 2 concepts that I've covered today in detail? Okay, my fingers are getting fast.
So, question, real quick. So you mentioned barriers of entry with market structure.
Yes, sir.
Would those be 2 separate concepts, or you're saying that they go hand in hand, and you would, if you're talking about one, you'd have to talk about the other?
Okay, they go hand in hand. So they're just like a definition of what makes it a market structure, right? So I'm looking at oligopoly. So what are the factors within oligopoly, right? Few large firms dominate. Okay, that's the definition. Interdependency of the firm. Interdependency, the key word, the firms need each other, right? So when somebody says I'm independent, I'm like, I get it, but we want to be interdependent. Like all of us on this call, we're interdependent. So the players in the industry depend on each other. They feed off of each other, right? And then some barriers of entry. So it's a sub factor that not anybody can just come in, right? You're gonna have to have a pretty penny to be able to come into the space or other type of.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
You're welcome very much, sir. All right, good question. Going once, I'm 7 minutes back. All right. So I'm just gonna set it up for Ms. Darlene, get ready. You have about 5 minutes that you'll be up, ma'am. Just wanna give you, if you're not ready already, I'll make you the host so that you can share your slides if necessary. So while Darlene is getting ready mentally, physically, and so forth, we're gonna talk about business combination, and Ms. Darlene is gonna co-teach this for the rest of the class. If nobody else have any questions, then we're gonna wrap up. So think of business combination, right, as a tool that businesses can use, as I did my eye opener, or if I can use as my snapshot of different combinations that they can expand internally or externally, okay, organically. And then in week 1, we touched on it a little bit when we did New Earth Mining. They broke up their expansion to South Africa, either horizontal, vertical, and conglomerate. So if you're gonna think about, okay, what are some of the different options that I have? Darlene's gonna go into great detail. Franchising is one option of business combination. Licensing, M&A. For me, I don't like M&A because in the context of this course, as an MBA graduate now, it's rare that companies actually merge. There's friendly merger on paper, but most of the time it's hostile. Majority of the time it's hostile. I call it acquisition. I like the A part of M&A more than the M part. So that's a business combination. You have one we call SBUs, strategic business units. You have one called MBO, management buyouts. So there's so many different combinations that you can use, right, to get the end goal that you want. And Darlene's probably going to do far better justice than I am right now about what they are, what are the pros and cons. If you do licensing, what are the pros and cons to that? If you do franchising, what are the pros and cons to that? If you do joint venture, what is that? If you do a strategic alliance, what are the pros and cons that goes into each one of them? And that's what we have, okay? So Darlene is going to touch on many of these concepts: mergers, acquisitions, joint venture, strategic alliance, franchising, and licensing. And that's what we call business combination. Okay, Darlene, they're all yours. All right, and then I will play the role as a student, and I'll just be in the background. So Ms. Darlene, I'm making you a host, and the peers are all yours. You got this, Darlene. You're gonna do phenomenal.
I'm working on it. I'm finding my deck here.
Got it.
And where is the deck?
Okay. So we do see your screen. But your slides are truncated. Okay. If you maybe go, if you want to go to slideshow.
If it doesn't switch me over to my other monitor, we'll be good. Oh,
Perfect. You look phenomenal right now. It looks perfect on my
okay.
side.
All right, let me slide you guys over. You can't see the slide, but I can. Okay. So we're going to talk about methods of business expansion. That's what we're talking about when we talk about business combinations. It's different ways that businesses can expand. We'll start with some simple questions to get us started and figure out where we are in terms of a baseline. So what's the difference between organic and inorganic business expansion? Does anyone know? Well, then we have a learning opportunity there. Let's go to the next question and see what we've got. What are the limitations of organic expansion?
Money?
Yeah.
Yep, that's a key driver is funding. So very good. That was Charlie. Charles?
Yeah, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. What's the difference between a partnership and a joint venture?
Right. Isn't a partnership between like two individuals versus joint ventures between two companies?
Oh, Justin, you
Did I
are
say that
right
right?
on the money, right on the money. You got that down pat. Okay. What's the difference?
His wife gave him the answer.
Oh, she's upstairs.
I couldn't resist. Darling, I just couldn't resist. I'm a bad student, so apologize for that. You can grade me down. You can
Yeah,
downgrade
that's
me.
okay. I think it cost him a cabinet this weekend. What's the difference between a merger and an acquisition? Okay.
I think the
Learning-
professor actually kind of alluded at it. A merger is sort of a mutual combination of two companies. And an acquisition is a takeover of one company, taking over another company through, I don't know how to explain it, but basically just
Yeah.
kind of forcing them to merge.
That's a good summation, Charlie, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about that. What's an example of licensing?
Like sports teams, I guess. Let's say like you need a license if you're gonna like print the Patriots logo on something.
Yeah,
I think.
perfect. Perfect, Justin. You are our A student so far tonight. What are the limitations of being a franchisee?
Lack of
Good
control of the
choice.
product.
Oh, you are so good, Charlie. You are there.
That wasn't me.
Oh, it wasn't you. Who was it?
That was Tyler.
Oh, hi, Ty. Good job. All right. What are the examples of, give me some examples. I think we've already, talked about some of the sport things. What's the difference between a public and a private sector?
Public sector is government controlled. Private is privately owned, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about their different goals and construct. What business combinations are possible for your choice and opportunity, and why? So we'll come back to that question. We'll look at these questions again at the end of the session and see if we are able to better articulate our responses. So what is organic? Organic business expansion is internal, and I think someone did already say that is internal. I got to slide you guys over here because I keep looking away from my camera because I'm trying to see you. All right. So the organic business expansion is internal. Things like increasing the sales, increasing market penetration, a well-executed business plan like we're all writing about. But when you are doing something internal, you're limited to what funding you can acquire individually. So individually meaning the business itself. So it does create some limitations about how quickly one can expand their business and what their options for expanding their business are. When we take a look at some of our companies, they may want to be able to expand much faster than they would be able to do so if they did so on their own budget with their own resources. And so they want to go external to see when they want to look at other business combinations. And that's where we talk about business expansion being inorganic. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the session is different inorganic business expansions. That means that we're going outside the walls, outside the resources of our own company in order to expand our business. And there's lots of different types of business expansion. We're going to talk about mergers, acquisitions, joint ventures, strategic alliances, franchises, and licenses. And when it comes to the strategic alliances, we are really going to talk about the non-equity alliance. We're talking about two companies coming together for a single purpose. Mergers and acquisitions. I know that Professor has very clear ideas about mergers versus acquisitions. I tend to think of acquisitions as assimilations. If anybody watched Star Wars and knows the Borg, you know that, yeah, they acquired and you get absorbed into that mold. And that's really what an acquisition is all about. It's two companies, but they are not equal. One has a stronger position in the market, has more resources, has a stronger company structure, is able to, well, has more money when it comes to the acquisition because they're doing the buying. And the one that's being bought is in a lesser position and really then has to begin to take on the qualities, the climate, the attitude of the acquiring company. And that can be a challenge if you've got some significant differences in cultures between the different organizations. I can share that when my company, which was a little American company, got purchased by an international Indian company, it was a culture shock for us because that company had very different culture than our company, and there were some conflicts. So acquisition can be a challenge, but it's also a way to quickly acquire the skills, the resources, the market space that the buying company is looking for. So it's a very rapid way to expand. It does take significant funding because you are purchasing all rights of the company that you're taking on. A merger is two like companies, equal in power, equal in influence, equal in funding, that are coming together to on a voluntary business to create a new structure. They're going to have a baby together. They're going to come together and they're going to create a new structure to go after a certain market share, to go after products that complement their products, to bring in a new management structure, etc. I'll stop there. Any other questions about merger and acquisition before we move on to the next slide? Any examples that you
I have
can
a
share?
question.
Mhm.
So an acquisition, one company purchases another company, right? That's what you were saying?
Yes.
So when they purchase that company, where does that money go to? Because like if they purchase it, doesn't that mean it goes right back to the same company? Or like how does that transaction happen?
Well, it goes to those that own equity in the company.
Okay, so the shareholders, I guess, is what you're saying. And then
Oftentimes, and hopefully the professor will bail me out here. But you know, when you're talking about buying a company, one of the primary things that's negotiated is the price of the stock that you're going to purchase it at. And so the equity owners are the stockholders of, well, at least of a public company. And so the monies in turn go into the value of the stock that those stockholders hold. That's why you see the stock market sometimes go up or go down if you hear that a company is being acquired. Part of that plays into who's acquiring them and what they think the outcome of that acquisition is going to be on the stock that they hold.
And Darlene, there's no bailout there because you answered the same way that I would have answered it, right?
that was great. Thank you.
I want to add on to that will be what Darlene hit the nail right on the head. Is that Rodriguez and Co and everybody else. To Darlene's point, look at the balance sheet, right? So when you look at the balance sheet, you're going to see owner's equity. Now, if it's a private company, right, that becomes their equity, like as a private company. Then that money can also go into actually revamping the entire company to add value to the company. So I acquired the company at $20 billion. 15 billion will go to the shareholders, either it could be private or public. 5 billion can go back into as a retained earning to expand into a new market that we didn't have before. Now, a few years later, I revalued the company. Now it's worth 40 billion. It was the best investment ever for the company. Everybody goes scot-free. So yeah, so it goes internally and then also pay off shareholders. That's the only thing I want to add.
Let me move you back down. Okay. The examples that are provided here about mergers and acquisitions are Disney and ExxonMobil, which I should know more about, but I don't. And another one was AOL and Time Warner. Can anyone think of another actual merger where you had two like companies of equal influence and power and funding that came together?
Bayer Monsanto. The Bayer
Say again?
company, the Bayer company and the Monsanto company.
Yeah.
They were pretty much equal. They were both giants in what they did, and then they merged. Yeah.
And what was the outcome of that for the stockholders?
Actually, the market share exploded. it grew so exponentially that the DOJ was investigating them for attempting to form a monopoly and violating antitrust.
There you go.
So that's how huge that was, because they were going to corner the market on crop production, pretty much. Making sure that in the economic sense, that they were going to be able to ensure good and safe and sustainable crop production through their chemicals that they use to control pests, and also to grow and to genetically modify things like corn, foods like corn and everything to keep that going. So those two companies together sent shockwaves.
There you go.
Everything went up, but it sent shockwaves. And actually, the DOJ, they approved it. They allowed the merger. So it still stands.
And that was a great way to expand their market share very quickly, that they couldn't have done if they tried to do it organically. Okay. Did I get there? Next item is the joint ventures or strategic alliances. When we are talking about a joint venture, I have to correct myself. This is when we are creating a third company. It's not during a merger, it's during a joint venture. And some of the, I lost a screen. When we are talking about a joint venture, they are coming together with a very specific objective to come together with this joint venture. One company, it's a symbiotic relationship where each of them brings something to the table that together they can then go after a certain objective. For instance, with NBC and Disney, who created Hulu, and then we have Microsoft and General Electric that also came together in a joint venture. Now, they can be the same size companies, they can be different size companies that are going together with a joint venture. They don't have to be of equal measure, but they each bring critical items to the table in order to make that joint venture, that baby company, profitable and reach the goals that they're looking for. Then we have a strategic alliance, and here we're really talking about two companies that remain separate and distinct. However, contractually, they come together to be a symbiotic relationship with one another without truly sharing funding. The example they give here is Barnes & Noble and Starbucks. So Barnes & Noble and Starbucks, they are sharing the same physical space. And Starbucks is brewing the coffee, and Barnes & Noble is putting the books on the shelf. They each have their own business, but they're sharing the foot traffic. So it's of benefit to both of them. They're not sharing any bottom line with each other. There's no revenue sharing here, but what they are sharing is the customer base, the foot traffic, and they're sharing the rent of the building that they're working within. Questions on joint ventures or strategic alliances?
I have a question, Darlene.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi again. Nordstrom. I'm working Nordstrom as my project. And so when I was reading the International Trade Administration, when I was reading for the last milestone, they mentioned that joint ventures are highly desired with expanding a business into Mexico. So I'm not, absolutely, I did write that we would do that through the agent. I would have a designated in-country agent that would set up a joint venture type of structure for Nordstrom expanding and creating the third company with a, with a name or something, extension on the end of Nordstrom. How do I align that with an actual company there, or is it a joint venture in that we're partnering with another country? How is that set up or structured, or how do I write that? Am I doing it with kind of like a phantom retail business to say that it's a joint structure, or is it just with the international community, or how does that work?
So my guess would be that if you're looking at a joint venture in the international market and you're looking at Nordstrom as a retailer, you're likely going into that market to get into the same demographic level with a partner that has the same kind of reputation that Nordstrom can stand beside, right? So you're trying to get to the clientele that that Nordstrom products and pricing and services would appeal to in that country. So my guess would be you're looking for someone that has the retail space and the clientele acumen that would fit the Nordstrom demographic.
Oh, so like the Santa Fe Mall. So would my joint partnership be formed with the Santa Fe Mall? Because in Santa Fe, Mexico, it's an area called, it's a Santa Fe Mall in Mexico City, in Mexico, the country. So would I name that specifically as I'm forming a joint venture with the Santa Fe Mall? Because I want to put a store in the mall there, or some of the other malls on the high end in the urban areas and the high end urban areas.
Well,
Is the mall
my thought there, and I may have to dial a friend here, but my thought there is that if you're talking about the mall, you're really talking about availability of space. You're not going against the a complementary demographic. Maybe, and wild guess here, maybe you want to expand Nordstrom's jewelry line into a company that's very prominent in jewelry in that country, where you want to get quick market appeal. Or maybe there is a clothing company that has a very good reputation in that country that doesn't produce, I don't know, bathing suits. And Nordstrom could make their bathing suits available as a joint venture within that company's construct.
Yes, actually, in Mexico and doing my research, there is an enormous amount of, actually, there's mention of an enormous amount of designers, high-end, unique, how do I put it? Designers of unique clothing. They have a high market concentration of that there, where the designers are designing clothes, and people are making trips to Mexico to buy these clothes because they are unique. And that's they're making videos all on YouTube and everything about how they're shopping. And so, yes, Darlene, that's it. You are such a genius. That's why you're teaching this segment.
Yeah, that's it.
You're our leader. You're our leader, hon. Thank you. I think that's it.
Okay. Any other questions there? I'm glad I could help you answer your own question, Tracy, because it sounds like you really had it from the beginning. Okay, moving on to franchises and licensing. Now, typically when we think of franchise, I'm going to guess that most of us think of Subways and McDonald's, where you're going to buy the rights or license the, purchase the rights to carry McDonald's products with McDonald's brand, with McDonald's double arches on the top of your building, because you see that there is a demographic in an area that you think will be profitable. And as an individual, you want to own a McDonald's store because you think you could make money in that area. Now, it's a great way to start a business that has national acclaim. Certainly putting the double arches up on your building comes with a lot of expectations, because when you do earn the rights to be a franchisee, you now are under all the rules and regulations and controls and product mix that McDonald's tells you can have within your store. So it's not like you can set up a little jewelry front in the front of your McDonald's store and sell jewelry on the side. You can only sell McDonald's things in your McDonald's store, the McDonald's way, using McDonald's cooking methods, right? So it's a way to own your own business, but you're also limited by the rules and regulations of the financing organization behind it. Licensing is a lot different. Licensing, you're still buying something from another company that you're going to then utilize in your business, but you're buying the rights to utilize their brands. So, for instance, you want to sell Cinderella dolls. So you've got to buy the rights from Disney to put, I hope Cinderella is by Disney, to put Cinderella dolls in your store and call them Cinderella, not Cinderella, because Cinderella is a protected brand or a protected name. And apparently you can't call them zombies either, but we'll save that for another day. So the licensing here does give you more flexibility, because you can actually buy rights from a number of companies to show their brands. So you're not stuck with just Disney. You could also utilize Hasbro and get their licensing, and then in your store have both Disney and Hasbro type toys or merchandise or t-shirts or hats, whatever it is this business is that you want to go into. So you're buying the rights to utilize the power of their brand. Any questions between financing and licensing? Well, now that we've talked about the different commercial options that companies have in terms of business combinations, we now want to turn our attention to what other options are out there. So let's talk about the private and the public sectors and what the differences are. And Charlie hit right on what some of the differences were. First is funding. So where does the money come from for the public business versus the private business? Well, for the public business, the money comes from us. It comes from tax dollars. It comes from different fees and licenses that agency charges us as consumers of that service through the public sector. For instance, when you go to the DMV, the license for your your car is not free. There's a fee that you're paying for that license, and that fee helps to then subsidize that public sector. They also get funding from the particular state that they're doing business in order to have the building, to have the resources. They're all state employees that work for that public sector when we're talking about DMV. And what do? Well, they're all about enforcement or monitoring or making rules and laws. So they're all about setting the construct for which companies and individuals live within the rules of what the public sector is overseeing. On the private sector, where does that money come from? It comes strictly from profit. The public sector doesn't have to worry too much about making a profit because they are publicly funded. But on the private sector, if your costs outweigh your revenue, you're not going to be in the private sector very long. Your profit is what allows you to stay in business. Now, how do they intersect? And this is where we're going to start talking a little bit more. The public can influence the private sector. Certainly, I wouldn't encourage anyone to go into the DMV and argue about whether or not you should have to renew your license this year. You're not going to get a long way. But we do see the private sector influencing the public sector in terms of lobbying, in terms of protesting, in terms of coming together as like organizations in like markets, like trade unions. And so the trade union then can do its own lobbying or protesting or funding campaigns to help influence how that public sector views your particular market, your particular industry, or your particular company. Any questions between the differences between the public and the private sectors? Okay. Then we move on to what they call P3, or the 3 Ps, public-private partnerships. And I cannot say that 3 times fast. But where that is where the public and the private sectors come together in order to facilitate a project or a service that is to the benefit of the public. And there's also benefits to the private company for having participated in this particular venture or this particular combination. So maybe the private company gets some tax breaks. Maybe they get the ability to tap into resources that they wouldn't have on their own. Our public sector is pretty massive with lots and lots of resources and specialties and industry analysis and all kinds of skills that they can tap into. And when you find that lovely match between how the private sector can do good and the public sector can benefit from that, that's where you're talking about the public-private partnerships. You see them a lot in transportation, bridges, roads, community centers. This is where you see the public and private sectors come together in a cooperative agreement, whether it be long-term or short-term, and both entities then benefit from that integration. Here we have a discussion about how the public sector should engage with the private sector, and vice versa. We did talk a little bit about how the public sector is wise to engage with the public, with the elected officials, to influence their decision making, to let's say not so much influence in terms of monetary influence, but sometimes just to educate the public officials on why their business is important, what they do that is that warrants consideration as they're looking at rules, regulations, and compliance. Also want to create that shared vision that and here I'm punting because I'm not really clear on this one. So when you are talking about the public sector and the private sector coming together, you've got to be really clear about roles and responsibilities for each of them, keeping in mind that they have very different agendas. The private sector is a service organization or a regulatory organization or lawmaking organization, where the private sector is a profit maker and is looking at making profit. So you need to make sure that you're very clear about what the roles and boundaries are. You also want to make sure that you have really equal decision-making authority between the two agencies.
Darlene, I have an example of that.
Perfect. Nikki, I'd love to hear from you.
It's Angie. It's Angie.
Okay.
So my example that I'm going to present here is going to be the Life Flight helicopter in Maryland. So the Life Flight helicopter is basically the ones that will fly you out after you've had a car accident and such. However, the state troopers are actually the ones that really run the gamut here of making sure that there's enough helicopters available. And so what happens when the state troopers run out of helicopter availability, the Life Flight helicopters come in, and then it's the private sector charging and for the flights and stuff like that to be able to get those last bit out. So they're kind of supplementing, but they're charging the state them for the extra services needed in this area.
That's a great example of how that came together.
Yes, well-defined, very clear, and when they come into play, how it happens.
One of the other examples that I found when I was looking for examples to share was in Seattle in 2012. The Gigabyte Squared company partnered with the city of Seattle to supply high-speed cable to all residents. So here we had a benefit to the public, also a benefit to the company that produced the high-speed cable and then was able to, of course, offer other products in their product line to that same population. Hang on. My mouse isn't playing with me. Does this look familiar? So let's do a quick wrap up. What's the difference between organic and inorganic business expansion?
One's internal, one's external.
Oh, you are so good, Justin. What are the limitations of organic expansion?
You have to
Come on,
have the right
Charlie.
funds.
Oh,
What's the difference between a partnership and a joint venture?
Thought that was answered. Partnership is between
Yeah.
two individuals. Joint ventures are between two companies.
Very good. The difference between a merger and an acquisition?
A merger
Mergers.
occurs between equal size companies, and an acquisition, they're in equal size and one takes over the other.
Very good. What's an example of licensing?
Professor Bismarck paying the commanders to use that slide at the beginning of the presentation.
I like it. What are some of the limitations of being a franchisee?
You have to use those products and stay within the boundaries set by the franchise.
What are some examples of a franchise?
Donald's.
Donald,
What's the difference between the public and the private sectors?
One's government
Government
run, one's privately run.
And here's one that you can take back to your papers based on the information you've learned here. What are the business combinations are possible for your chosen opportunity and why? So that ends the co-teaching here. I'll turn it back over to Professor.
Caroline, you don't need-
Good job.
Great job, Darlene.
Does anybody have any questions for Darlene? I know time is not our best friend, but any field questions for Darlene?
That
Besides-
was fantastic.
Besides her teaching next week and the week after that and the week after that.
It's a good idea.
I'd be here.
Awesome, awesome. Going
You'd have to
once.
pay her though. The first one's free.
Yes.
Darlene, my lawyer will be calling you, okay?
And I don't know how to turn control back over to you, Professor.
If you don't mind, hover over my name on the right-hand side. And then you're gonna see 3 dots.
Yeah.
Click on the 3 dots, and then they'll give an option to make me host. And you did it correct.
Okay, perfect. And thank you. And that was kind of fun, guys. Thank you for being so supportive.
Oh, we're a team, right? This is the best part of learning right here, if you ask me. Time's not our best friend, but Darlene, I think I'm looking at your peer's face. The fact that they stayed on, and I say that very politely. Your content was rich in content. They cannot wait to get your slides, all right? They cannot wait. So, because that's gonna actually help them as a reference guide to next week's discussion post. You have just done their discussion post for them. So they're actually thanking you in their head right now. You have no idea. So if you have your Cash App ID, this is the time to put it there. I'm just joking.
There you go.
I get fired. Don't do that. Yeah, I mean, I want to reserve your peers to give you some comments. Any comments on her delivery, her content? I do this for a purpose, so I'll share that at the end. Any feedback for Darlene? Her delivery, her content, what you got away from it, what she can do to improve, but any feedback for her growth?
She couldn't have done that any better.
Yeah, it was great.
I think asking the questions was a good move to keep people engaged.
Yeah, those questions were perfect.
Thank you for your support, guys. You're all grand. And I can't wait to hear which one of you will be teaching next week.
I already have the name already, so Darlene and Charlie. So I got another victim already, a long time. So I can't wait. Yeah, let's Darlene, I echo everything everybody said. Please, please, please. Those slides, we're gonna send it out to all your peers. And ladies and gentlemen, it's rich in content. Take advantage of it, all right? And I know it's gonna be a great, great help. Jim said it very well. Expert matter. I mean, literally, you communicate like an expert. You went over those slides, you communicated well, you answered their questions. I give you a lot of credit for that. All right. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I want to close it out. So anybody on this call like money? Who likes money? Who likes money? Okay, you sure? Who does not like money? Who just like, look, I just do everything for free for life. I mean, if they had a system, they would just like do a barter system and go back to the barter. You bring me bread, I give you sugar.
How about balance?
Very diplomatic answer.
I like them both.
Okay. So this is what the roadmap is going to look. So I have one student I'm going to send a very polite email to, and everyone, you're on, like Darlene is a perfect example. Charlie's a perfect example. And we're going to set you up to be successful, right? So Darlene can testify that, you know, she has great information to be able to do what she did. So you're not going to be by yourself. Charlie had some leg up. You're not going to be by yourself. So the next one we're going to do is someone's going to do currency for me. I already have that person in mind. So I'm going to politely send them an email first. And if they decline, next week, I'm going to embarrass them and say they declined. So ladies and gentlemen, it's their fault. If we don't get the lesson right, I'm just joking. So next topic we're going to do student teach will be currency. If you want to volunteer now, let me know, but I have some slides that I'll send to you, like I sent to Darlene, and then you can go through it and then edit it to fit what you have. All right. Quick takeaway. What did you guys get away from today? Milestone 2 is due on Sunday. Next week, we're going to hit 3, and we also have a discussion post on Sunday. So we have 2 whammies again next week. But the discussion post already been done. Darlene has done it for you. Sincerely. I mean that sincerely. Just don't copy and paste. That's plagiarism, but just rephrase it in your own words and you're good to go. Nicole, you're on my screen big. What's your takeaway from tonight?
I thought it was really great. Elasticity, I think, stuck with me the most. So that will be a big thing that obviously I'll be including in my paper, but no, it was a really good session. And Darlene, again, you did an absolutely amazing job. So very, very good.
I agree. Mr. Rodriguez, you're to my right. What was your takeaways, sir?
Yeah, so yeah, same thing. Darlene, great job. Just, you know, some notes for the milestone 2, market structure, how to fit it in with the project, and how the barriers of entry go hand in hand with the market structure. So that was a good takeaway for me.
Awesome, awesome.
I have a quick question, Professor. I wasn't, I think I couldn't attend last week. Did you, from what I gather, you all mentioned that there is a chapter that doesn't exist, right? For the required reading for this week?
Yeah, so let me clarify that. I'm glad you brought it up because actually it has escaped me. In your bundle, those chapters are available. If not, I do have a PDF that I can fire out if I reach out to the textbook support, because normally they do provide me with PDF just in case the bundle is not there. So Tracy, if you confirm again, it's that bundle is not a part of the reading?
It's not
It
there.
is. It is there.
Chapter 7 was not there.
Okay.
And we put it in the discussion post. We also put in there that you're gonna buy us, I put in the discussion that you're gonna buy us all donuts at our respective graduations because we're looking for a chapter which was not included in that bundle.
I can't wait for a graduation. I'll be in my gown, but then Barbara is gonna bail me out because I can't afford donuts on my salary.
No. You know the military rules. You know, whenever we make a blunder like that and we're the leader, we provide donuts. And so they can't be expensive donuts, but they gotta at least be tasty, you know.
Yeah.
Okay,
Buy
she's
some
gonna
good
keep
things.
out by donuts because in the Navy, that's beer.
At least I was cheaper with the donuts.
Barbara, bail me out.
Well, I'm a little bit confused. So you're saying, because I saw chapter 9 is there, risk analysis, real options, and capital
Yeah.
budgeting.
The
That's
net
there.
present value one is not.
Present value.
That was in chapter 5 or 4 or 3, but it was not, there was no chapter 7. It looks like what they did was they compiled for us, tailored to this course, just certain chapter excerpts from different finance
And that's
books.
exactly what we did. That's exactly what we did. So we call it a bundle, right? So the chapter should be out of order, just a bundle for the modules because the whole textbook cannot be 10 weeks. So that's exactly what we did. But all of your bundles should be there and bundled together for no pun intended. If
Yeah, I
not-
couldn't find it. I thought I was going crazy, and then Tracy mentioned it earlier, so I was like, all right, it's not just
So
me.
which chapter can't you guys find? Sorry to talk over you. Roger.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7.
7.
Okay. So
And what's the title of the chapter that you can't find?
Net present value. I don't have the full one. It starts
Yeah.
with net present value.
So I have that
Okay.
old book too. I bought the whole thing. So
That's a-
chapter 7 is called financing activities in the book called financial reporting, financial statement analysis and valuation.
Mhm. So man, you got to make sure you have the right edition now. Remember, right? The edition is really important too. So Barbara, again, are you co-signing that it's in there, but it was titled differently?
No, I'm not. I'm saying
Mm.
that when I took the finance and the precursor to this course, we had to
523.
buy that book or we had to use that book, and I bought it and saved it because I'm horrible at this kind of stuff. So I want to
Oh,
keep it.
that book.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I bought the hard copy of the finance literacy book, Finance Literacy for Managers, and there is no chapter 7.
So let's do this. So my takeaway will be, I will email the bookstore and request for a PDF to be sent out, okay? Because it happens in some of our courses, so this is nothing new. Thank you so much, Tracy. I don't know if you take a virtual donut, if that would do, but I don't know.
No, I
It's
can't
one
eat
of virtual
a
world.
virtual donut.
That's the best I
Um,
okay.
I'll be walking in December, and so whenever that graduation is, so I'll have my donut at that time. I like
Um,
chocolate.
I'm gonna cheer for you. Does that make a difference? Anyway, some of your peers want to run. So if I'm gonna cheer for you really, really loud and said, that's one of my scholars. I don't know if that helps, but you make it. You graduate with distinction. Charlie closed me out before Tracy hijacks me for another food that I can't afford.
I actually I'm kind of with her. I want donuts too.
Like
So
I said,
Thank you, that's my brother.
yeah,
Charlie
Jim.
is our brother. You know, he's our co-leader. Darlene and Charlie are our class leaders. They are co-leaders. And so, yes.
thank
all
you.
of them.
Jim, bail me out. Jim, bail me out. Okay. Jim, you
Oh,
there?
are you still talking to me? Did you?
Jim, bail me out, sir.
Jim put his stuff in the chat,
Jim
but he
had to
can't make
write.
up his wife. Yeah.
Yeah, he.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leslie,
I gotta.
1994. Leslie, be my Jim for today.
What did I learn for today? Or I learned that everybody wants to eat donuts and that your favorite football team is the Washington Commanders. Although I'm a diehard New England Patriots fan, and I like chocolatinis and not donuts. So
So Darlene gave an amazing lecture. I mean, and that's all we took away was
no, I really enjoyed Darlene's presentation as well, but I just figured it was so off topic that we might as well, throw in our 2 cents. Unfortunately, I was really sick as I emailed you the last couple of weeks, so I did miss a couple of presentations, but I look forward to going back through the previous week's slides and being able to revise the paper with the additions that you had stated on like the 5 to 7 key areas in specific detail, which was really helpful because it allows me to further envelop my paper with more content. So,
That's really fair. Awesome.
and I expect a chocolatini, please.
Tracy, you see what you've started? Okay, anyway, we're gonna set a record for the longest call known to mankind, politely. So this is what we're gonna do. Darlene, I have all of their emails. So with your permission, should I send the same slides or you wanna send your slides? What do you want me to do?
And I'm talking on mute.
Okay.
So go ahead. If you want, I'll send my deck to you and you can send it out. Or if I reply all, will it go out to everyone?
Yes, it will. But I don't know if there's anybody new here. So just to be on the safe side, I want Renee, send it to all, right? And also I'll get a copy and it'll just be another redundant round again. If you haven't already, just for our Darlene's sake, just put in your email in the chat and I'll just add it to my docket and you just hit reply all when you receive mine. Is that fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, so I'll just add that right now. So you guys are gonna get my deck twice. Okay, you guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. Everyone, have a good night. And besides your donuts, I'll send you a virtual donuts. I can definitely do some coloring and then send it out to everyone. Just I'll have a disclaimer at the bottom. Please, it's not consumable. Please, I don't want to get sued. Okay. All
Well,
right.
make sure they at least have sprinkles, you know, since they're gonna be virtual, you know, they should have sprinkles and, you know, some things popping up out of them and, you know, dancing.
Those are for winners.
Oh, no.
I'm just being
I want mine
polite
to
right
be pink.
Thank you.
now. Okay. I'm just nodding my head like Justin. Yes, honey. Yes,
Right,
please.
just,
You can have a beer pop out of the middle of it too. You know, you can have a beer pop up out of the donut hole so that
As-
we can have beer with the donut.
Okay, with that, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
good night,